Picture a glittering gala at Haverford Manor where a priceless diamond, the star of Aurora, vanishes in a sudden blackout. Enter Miss Jane Marple, a sharp-eyed old lady with a knack for secrets. As suspects greedy Sir Reginald, envious Clara, cunning Mr. Vaughan, dramatic Mrs. Drake, and quiet butler Jenkins weave lies. Miss Marple unravels clues: a scrap of silk, a hidden room, a scratched fuse box. With a clever trap, she catches the thief, proving no secret escapes her knitting. Needles. Dive into a mystery where every glance hides a motive and one diamond sparks a web of betrayal. Chapter 1. The glittering gala. The village of St. Mary Mead buzzed with excitement. It was the night of the grand gala at Haverford Manor, a big stone house that stood like a king on a hill. Everyone in the village talked about it for weeks. The gala was the fanciest event of the year, where rich folks and curious villagers mixed under twinkling lights. Miss Jane Marple, a small, quiet lady with sharp eyes and a knack for noticing things, was invited. She wasn't one for fancy parties, but Lady Haverford, the manor's owner, had asked her personally. Miss Marple couldn't say no to a friend, even if she preferred her cozy cottage and knitting. The manor's gates were wide open, and carriages, well, cars these days, rolled up the long driveway. Miss Marple stepped out of a taxi, her black dress simple but neat. Her white hair was tucked under a modest hat, and her eyes sparkled like they knew secrets. She walked up the stone steps, her cane tapping softly. The air smelled of roses and perfume, and laughter spilled from the open doors. Inside, the ballroom was a sight to behold. Chandeliers hung like giant diamonds, casting golden light on the polished wood floor. Tables were covered with white, cloths piled with cakes, sandwiches, and glasses of bubbly drink. A band played soft music, and people twirled in fancy dresses and suits. Miss Marple stood near the door watching. She didn't dance or chatter much, but she saw everything. The way Mrs. Pennyworth's necklace swung as she laughed. The way young Tommy from the village stared at the food, too shy to grab a plate. And the way Lady Haverford, tall and proud, moved through the crowd, her smile tight like she was hiding a worry. Lady Haverford was the star of the night, not just because she owned the manor, but because of what she was showing off: a diamond called the Star of Aurora. People whispered it was worth more than the whole village, maybe even a castle. The diamond sat in a glass case on a table in the center of the room. It was guarded by two men in black suits who stood like statues. The case was velvet inside, and the diamond sparkled under a tiny spotlight. It was big as a walnut, cut to catch every bit of light, throwing rainbows on the walls. People crowded around, gasping and pointing. Miss Marple eased closer, her eyes narrowing. She didn't care much for jewels, but she knew people. And people, she thought, could be trouble around something so shiny. Lady Haverford spotted Miss Marple and hurried over, her green dress swishing. "Jane, you came," she said, her voice warm but a little shaky. "I'm so glad this night hits a lot, isn't it?" Miss Marple smiled, her face soft but her eyes sharp. "It's lovely, Margaret. The diamond is quite something." Lady Haverford's hand touched her necklace, a habit when she was nervous. "It's been in the family for years. My father said it's cursed, but I don't believe in that nonsense. Still, I'm glad you're here. You always see things others miss." Miss Marple nodded, saying nothing. She didn't believe in curses either, but she believed in greed. And greed, she knew, could make people do wild things. She glanced at the crowd. There was Sir Reginald, a man with a big laugh and bigger debts, sipping his drink too fast. Clara, Lady Haverford's niece, stood by the diamond case, her eyes hungry. Mr. Vaughan, a smooth-talking American who knew jewels, was chatting with a group, his smile too perfect. And Mrs. Penelope Drake, a writer of mystery books, was scribbling. In a notebook, her face lit with excitement. Miss Marple tucked their names away in her mind, like threads in her knitting. The night went on, and the room grew warm with laughter and music. Miss Marple found a chair by a window, her hands folded in her lap. She watched as Clara whispered to Mr. Vaughan, her face close to his. She saw Sir Reginald slip out to the balcony, his shoulders tense. And she noticed Jenkins, the Manor's butler, moving quietly, his eyes darting to the diamond case now and then. Jenkins was old, with a face like a carved stone, but he moved like a cat. Silent and sure. Dot around 11. Lady Haverford clapped her hands. The music stopped, and the crowd turned. "My friends," she said, her voice carrying, "thank you for coming. Tonight we celebrate not just this gala, but the Star of Aurora, a treasure of my family. I invite you to view it closely, but please, no touching." The crowd laughed, and people lined up to see the diamond. Miss Marple stayed seated, her eyes flicking from face to face. She saw Clara's fingers twitch, like she wanted to grab something. Mr. Vaughan leaned close to the case, his eyes studying the diamond like a map. Mrs. Drake was still writing, muttering to herself. Sir Reginald came back inside, his face red. From the cold door, maybe from something else. Then it happened. Just past midnight, the lights went out. The chandeliers blinked off, and the room plunged into darkness. Gasps filled the air, followed by a scream. Miss Marple sat still, her heart steady. She counted the seconds: 1, 2, 3. The darkness felt heavy, like a blanket over the room. Someone bumped into a table and glass shattered. "Oh, may cursed, sir. Reginald," she thought. Then, as suddenly as it started, the lights snapped back on. The room was a mess. People stood frozen, their faces pale. A tray of drinks had spilled, and shards of glass glittered on the floor. Lady Haverford rushed to the diamond case, her hands shaking. She gasped, and Miss Marple stood, moving quickly despite her age. The case was open. The velvet inside was empty. The Star of Aurora was gone. "It's stolen!" Lady Haverford cried, her voice breaking. "My diamond!" The guards looked stunned, their hands empty. The crowd buzzed, some shouting, others whispering. Miss Marple reached the case, her eyes scanning it. The lock was untouched, no scratches or dents. Whoever opened it knew what they were doing. She looked at the crowd, her mind racing. 90 seconds of darkness. Enough time for a clever thief. Lady Haverford grabbed Miss Marple's arm. "Jane, please," she whispered, her eyes wet. "You're the only one who can help. Find my diamond, I beg you." Miss Marple patted her hand, her face calm. "I'll do my best, Margaret. Now, let's keep everyone here. No one leaves." Guards blocked the doors, and Jenkins began rounding up the guests. Miss Marple's eyes moved over the room. Sir Reginald was wiping sweat from his brow. Clara clutched her purse, her knuckles white. Mr. Vaughan stood by the case, his face blank, but his eyes sharp. Mrs. Drake was still writing, her pen moving fast. And Jenkins, quiet as ever, watched it all. Miss Marple's mind worked like her knitting needles, pulling threads together. A blackout, a locked case, a room full of suspects. She didn't know who took the diamond, not yet, but she knew one. Things someone in this room was cleverer than they seemed, and she would find them. The gala was over, but the real game had just begun. Chapter 2. The suspects assemble the morning after the gala. Haverford Manor felt heavy, like a house holding its breath. The ballroom, so bright and lively the night before, was now quiet, its chandeliers dim. The Star of Aurora, the diamond, that had sparkled like a tiny sun, was gone, stolen in a blink during the blackout. Miss Jane Marple, with her neat black dress and sharp eyes, stood in the drawing room, ready to unravel the mess. Her white hair was tucked under a simple hat, and her cane rested against a chair. She didn't need it much, but it was handy for pointing at things or people. Lady Haverford, still shaken, had begged Miss Marple to stay and help. The police were coming, but St. Mary Mead's small station wasn't used to big crimes like this. Miss Marple agreed, not because she wanted glory, but because she couldn't resist a puzzle. And this was a good one. A diamond worth a fortune, a locked case, and a room full of people with secrets. She asked Lady Haverford to gather everyone from the gala who was still at the manor. No one was to leave until she'd had a look at them. The drawing room was grand, with tall windows letting in gray morning light. Heavy curtains framed the view of the manor's gardens, where dew clung to the roses. A fire crackled in the fireplace, but it didn't chase away the chill of suspicion. Miss Marple stood by a long table, her hands folded, watching as the guests trickled in. They were a mixed bunch, each with a reason to be nervous. She'd seen enough of human nature to know that when something valuable went missing, fingers started pointing. First came Sir Reginald, a tall man with a red face and a loud laugh that didn't reach his eyes. He was a gambler, known for betting more than he could pay. His suit was fine but wrinkled, like he'd slept in it. He slumped into a chair, muttering about the blasted inconvenience of staying overnight. Miss Marple noted his shaky hands, and the way he kept glancing at the door, like he wanted to bolt. Next was Clara, Lady Haverford's niece. She was young, with dark hair and a pretty face, but her eyes were sharp, like a fox sizing up a henhouse. Her blue silk dress, the one she'd worn at the gala, now swapped for a plain skirt and blouse. But Miss Marple remembered the way Clara had stared at the diamond. Clara sat stiffly, her hands twisting in her lap. She shot a quick look at Sir Reginald, then away, like she didn't want to be caught. Mr. Vaughan. The American jeweler strolled in with a smile that was too smooth. He was handsome, with slick-back hair and a suit that screamed money. He'd been chatting about gems all night, showing off his knowledge. Miss Marple had noticed how close he'd stood to the diamond case, his fingers twitching like they wanted to touch it. He leaned against the wall now, arms crossed. Looking combat, his eyes darted to Clara, then to the floor. Last came Mrs. Penelope Drake, the mystery writer. She was older, with wild gray curls and a bright scarf that looked out of place in the gloomy room. She carried a notebook, her pen scratching even as she sat down. Mrs. Drake had been scribbling at the gala, muttering about inspiration. Miss Marple wondered if her stories were more than just make-believe. Mrs. Drake's eyes sparkled with excitement, like she was enjoying the drama a bit too much. Jenkins, the manor's butler, stood by the door, his face blank. He was old, with thin gray hair and a back straight as a ruler. He'd worked for Lady Haverford for years, moving through the manor like a shadow. Last night, Miss Marple had seen him near the diamond case, his eyes flicking to it when he thought no one was. Looking now, he was all business, handing out tea with steady hands. But Miss Marple didn't trust steady hands. Sometimes they hid the most. Lady Haverford entered, her face pale under her powdered makeup. She wore a dark dress, her necklace gone, like she couldn't bear to wear jewels after losing the diamond. "Thank you for staying," she said, her voice thin. "Miss Marple will ask some questions. I trust her completely. The police will be here soon, but until then, please help her." The guests nodded, some grudgingly. Sir Reginald coughed. Clara stared at her shoes. Mr. Vaughan's smile tightened, and Mrs. Drake's pen paused. Miss Marple stepped forward, her voice soft but clear. "I'm not a detective," she said, "but I notice things. A dime doesn't vanish on its own. Someone in this room knows more than they're saying. Let's start with last night. Where were you when the lights went out?" Silence hung heavy. Sir Reginald spoke first, his voice loud. "I was on the balcony, getting some air. Too stuffy in there? Didn't see a thing." He rubbed his neck, his eyes sliding away. Miss Marple nodded, her face kind, but her eyes sharp. "And you came back right after the lights returned?" "Yes, yes," he said quickly. Heard the scream, rushed in, found everyone in a tizzy. Clara spoke next, her voice small. "I was by the refreshment table. I bumped into someone when it went dark, don't know who." Her cheeks flushed and she looked down. Mr. Vaughan raised a hand, his tone easy. I was near the diamond case, admiring it. When the lights went out, I stayed put. Didn't want to trip over anything? His smile was steady, but Miss Marple caught a flicker in his eyes, like he was measuring her. Mrs. Drake laughed, a sharp sound. I was in the corner, writing. Darkness is perfect for suspense, you know? I didn't move, too busy jotting down ideas. She tapped her notebook, her smile wide. Miss Marple turned to Jenkins, who stood like a statue. And you, Jenkins. You were serving drinks, I believe. He bowed slightly. Yes, ma'am. I was near the back of the room carrying a tray. When the lights failed, I stood still to avoid spilling anything. His voice was flat, like he was reading a script. Miss Marple smiled, but her mind was busy. 5 stories, all neat, all possible. But one or more was a lie. She picked up her knitting from the table, her needles clicking softly. The sound seemed to make Clara flinch. Thank you, Miss Marple said. Now, let's talk about the diamond case. Jenkins, you checked it this morning, didn't you? Jenkins nodded. Yes, ma'am. The case was open, the diamond gone. The lock wasn't broken. Someone opened it properly, with skill. The room stirred. Sir Reginald snorted. Skill? Sounds like a professional thief. Not one of us. Clara's eyes widened. But who here could do that? Mr. Vaughan shrugged. Locks like that aren't easy. Takes practice. Maybe someone brought tools. Mrs. Drake leaned forward, her voice eager. Or someone knew the combination. Oh, it's like my book, The Sapphire Plot. The butler did it. She laughed, then stopped when no one joined her. Jenkins' face didn't change. But Miss Marple saw his fingers tighten on the teapot. Lady Haverford spoke, her voice sharp. The combination was in my safe, and only I knew it. I checked this morning. It's still locked, untouched. Miss Marple's needles clicked faster. A locked case, a secret combination, and 90 seconds. Of darkness, she looked at each face, searching for a crack. Sir Reginald's debts made him desperate. Clara's envy of her aunt's wealth was no secret. Mr. Vaughan's knowledge of jewels could include locks. Mrs. Drake's flair for drama might hide a clever mind. And Jenkins' quiet, loyal Jenkins knew the manor better than anyone. Let's consider the blackout, Miss Marple said. It lasted just over a minute. Enough time for someone to move to the case, open it, take the diamond, and slip away. Who here knows about electricity? The question hung in the air. Sir Reginald shook his head. Not me. Can't even fix a lamp. Clara frowned. I don't know anything about wires. Mr. Vaughan chuckled. I'm a jeweler, not an electrician. Double quotes, Mrs. Drake's eyes lit up. I know a bit. I fixed a fuse in my cottage once. Wrote a story about it too. She grinned, like it was a game. Jenkins cleared his throat. The manor's wiring is old, ma'am. Blackouts happen sometimes. I can check the fuse box, but I'm no expert. Miss Marple nodded, her mind threading the clues. The blackout was key. Was it an accident or planned? She glanced at Mrs. Drake, whose excitement felt too bright. At Clara, whose hands hadn't stopped twisting. At Mr. Vaughan, whose calm was almost too perfect. At Sir Reginald, whose sweat betrayed him. And at Jenkins, whose stillness hid something deeper. Thank you all, she said, standing. I'll need to look around the manor, Lady Haverford. May I, of course, Jane? Lady Haverford said. Anything you need. As the guests left, Miss Marple stayed behind, her eyes on the room. She walked to the window, looking out at the gardens. Somewhere in this house, or in someone's pocket, was the star of Aurora. She didn't have the diamond yet, but she had something better, suspects. And suspects, she knew, always left trails. Her knitting needles clicked as she thought. The puzzle was taking shape, one stitch at a time. Chapter 3. A clue in the garden. The sun climbed higher over St. Mary Mead, casting long shadows across Haverford Manor's gardens. The morning was crisp. with a breeze that carried the sweet smell of roses and damp grass. Miss Jane Marple, her black dress, neat, and her white hair tucked under a plain hat, stepped out from the manor's heavy doors. Her cane tapped the stone path, though she moved with a spry step for a woman her age. The chaos of the stolen diamond, the star of Aurora, still hung over the house like a storm cloud. But Miss Marple's mind was clear. Puzzles needed patience, and she had plenty. Inside, the suspects were restless. Sir Reginald, Clara, Mr. Vaughan, Mrs. Drake, and Jenkins had all given their stories. But Miss Marple knew truth hid in small things others overlooked. She decided to explore the gardens where the gala's guests had spilled out onto the lawn last night. People got careless outside, she thought, dropping clues like crumbs. Her sharp eyes scanned the ground as she walked, her knitting bag slung over her arm. She didn't knit now. She hunted. The gardens were a maze of neat hedges, flower beds bursting with color, and gravel paths that crunched underfoot. A fountain bubbled in the center, its stone cherub spitting water into a wide basin. Miss Marple paused by a rosebush, its thorns sharp and its petals red as blood. Something caught her eye, a tiny scrap of blue silk, snagged on a thorn. She bent closer, careful not to touch it. The silk shimmered, delicate and torn, like a piece of a gown. Her mind flicked to Clara, who'd worn a blue silk dress at the gala, her eyes hungry as she stared at the diamond. Miss Marple plucked the scrap with a handkerchief, tucking it into her bag. Clue, small but sharp, like a needle in her knitting. She straightened, her eyes sweeping the garden. The path led to a stone bench under a willow tree, where guests had sat during the gala. She walked over, her cane tapping. The bench was cold, its surface etched with moss. Near its base, the gravel was scuffed, like someone had paced or struggled. Miss Marple knelt, her knees creaking, and spotted a cigarette butt half buried in the dirt. It was crumpled with a gold band around the filter fancy, like something Sir Reginald might smoke. He'd said he was on the balcony during the blackout, but the balcony was on the other side of the manor. Had he been here instead? She slipped the butt into her handkerchief, her mind threading the clue into place. The garden felt alive with secrets. Miss Marple followed the path to a low wall overlooking the manor's lawn. Last night, the lawn had been lit with lanterns and guests had wandered out, laughing and sipping drinks. She pictured the scene, Clara in her blue dress, Sir Reginald with his red face, Mr. Vaughan's smooth smile, Mrs. Drake scribbling, Jenkins gliding through the crowd. The blackout had lasted 90 seconds, enough time for someone to slip outside, maybe to hide or plan. But the diamond case was inside, so why come here? Unless the thief had an accomplice or a hiding spot. Miss Marple's eyes caught a glint. In the grass near the wall, she bent down, her fingers brushing the blades. It was a small metal pin, shaped like a star, the kind used to fasten a scarf. Mrs. Drake had worn a bright scarf last night, her wild curls bouncing as she rode in. Her notebook. The pin was bent, like it had been stepped on. Miss Marple tucked it away, her mind turning. Mrs. Drake had said she stayed in the ballroom writing during the blackout. But this pin suggested she'd been out here, moving fast enough to lose. Another thread, another knot. She stood, her gaze drifting to the manor's windows. The drawing room, where she'd questioned the suspects, looked out on this garden. Had someone watched her just now, nervous about what she'd find? She smiled faintly, her eyes sharp. Let them watch. She worked better under pressure. Miss Marple decided to talk to Clara first. The blue silk was a strong clue, and Clara's nervous hands in the drawing room had betrayed her. She found Clara in the manor's morning room, a sunny space with flowered curtains and a table set for tea. Clara sat alone, staring at a cup, her dark hair falling over her face. She sat across from the girl, her knitting bag on the table. I've been walking in the garden. It's lovely this time of year. Clara nodded, her fingers twisting a napkin. Yes, it's nice. Her voice was tight, like a string about to snap. Miss Marple pulled out her knitting, her needles clicking softly. The sound seemed to make Clara flinch. I found something. Out there, Miss Marple said, her eyes on her stitches. A bit of blue silk caught on a rosebush. It looked like your dress from last night. Clara's face went pale. My dress? I didn't go to the garden. I was in the ballroom all night. Her words came fast, tripping over each other. Miss Marple nodded, her face gentle. Course, but silk tears easily, doesn't it? Maybe you brushed against something and didn't notice. She watched Clara's hands, which shook now. Tell me again, where were you when the lights went out? Clara swallowed by the refreshment table. I told you. It was dark and I bumped into someone. I don't know who. Her eyes darted to the window, then back. Miss Marple's needles clicked. It must have been frightening. All that darkness. Did you hear anything? Footsteps, maybe? Clara shook her head. No, just people gasping, glass breaking. It was a mess. She leaned forward, her voice low. I didn't take the diamond, Miss Marple, I swear. Miss Marple smiled, her eyes soft but piercing. I believe you want to help, Clara. If you remember anything, even something small, come to me. She stood, her cane tapping as she left. Clara's denial was firm, but her fear was louder. The silk was no accident. Next, Miss Marple sought Jenkins. The butler was in the pantry polishing silver with a cloth. His face was blank, his movements precise. Good morning, ma'am, he said, not looking up. Can I assist you? Miss Marple leaned on her cane, her eyes on his hands. Been in the garden, Jenkins. Do you know the manor grounds well, don't you? He nodded, his cloth moving in slow circles. Yes, ma'am. Been here 20 years. Every path, every bush. I found a cigarette butt by the bench, she said. Her voice light, fancy kind, with a gold band. Do you know who smokes those? Jenkins' hand paused, just for a second. Could be Sir Reginald, ma'am. He's partial to those. Left them all over the balcony last night. His voice was steady, but Miss Marple caught the flicker in his eyes. And the blackout, she said, stepping closer. You said the wiring's old. Has it failed like that before? Jenkins set down the silver. Once or twice, ma'am. He met her gaze, his face unreadable. Miss Marple nodded. Indeed, thank you, Jenkins. She turned to leave, her mind racing. Jenkins knew more than he said. His pause, his comment, was too perfect. And Sir Reginald's cigarette butt didn't prove he was in the garden, but it muddied his story. She found Mrs. Drake in the library, surrounded by books and papers. The writer was scribbling furiously, her scarf gone, but her energy bright. Miss Marple, she said, her voice loud. This theft is marvelous. It's going straight into my next book. Miss Marple sat her knitting bag on her lap. I found a star-shaped pin in the garden, she said, her eyes on Mrs. Drake's face. It looked like yours. Mrs. Drake's pen stopped. A pin. Oh, I lose those all the time. Clumsy me. She laughed, but it was too sharp. I was in the ballroom, writing, didn't step outside. Miss Marple's needles clicked. Of course. Pins fall easily. Maybe you walked out earlier, before the blackout. Mrs. Drake's smile faltered. Earlier? No. I was too busy soaking up the drama. She waved her notebook, her eyes darting away. Miss Marple stood, her cane tapping. Drama is a fine thing, Mrs. Drake, but truth is better. She left her mind weaving the clues. The silk, the cigarette, the pin each pointed to a lie. Clara, Sir Reginald, Mrs. Drake, they'd all been outside, or wanted her to think they hadn't. And Jenkins knew something, his calm a mask. Back. In the garden, Miss Marple stood by the fountain, her eyes on the manor. But Diamond was gone, but its trail was here, in the grass, the thorns, the lies. She didn't have the answer yet, but she had threads, okay? And threads, she knew, always led to the truth. Chapter 4. The hidden room, the air in Haverford Manor, was thick with tension, like a storm waiting to break. Miss Jane Marple, her black dress tidy and her white hair neat under a plain hat, moved through the house with purpose. The star of Aurora, the diamond that had vanished during the gala's blackout, still missing, and the suspects Sir Reginald, Clara, Mr. Vaughan, Mrs. Drake, and Jenkins were growing restless. Miss Marple's sharp eyes missed nothing, and her mind worked like her knitting needles, pulling threads of clues into a pattern. The garden had given her a scrap of silk, a cigarette butt, and a star-shaped pin, each pointing to a lie. Now she needed to dig deeper, and the manor itself held secrets. After her morning in the garden, Miss Marple decided to explore the house. Old places like Haverford Manor had nooks and crannies where truths hid like dust in forgotten corners. She started in the library, a grand room with tall shelves stuffed with books. Their leather spines cracked from years of use. A fire burned low in the hearth, casting shadows on the wood-paneled walls. The room smelled of old paper and polish, and a heavy desk sat by a window, its surface cluttered with inkwells and papers. Miss Marple's cane tapped the floor as she moved, her eyes scanning every inch. She ran her fingers along the shelves, feeling for anything odd. People hid things in libraries. She knew letters, keys, secrets. Her hand paused on a shelf near the fireplace, where a book felt loose, like it didn't belong. She pulled at a thick volume on botany and heard a soft click. The shelf shifted, revealing a narrow panel that swung open. Miss Marple's heart quickened, but her face stayed calm. A hidden room. She'd expected something, but not this. The room was small, barely bigger than a closet, with dusty walls and a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. A rickety table held stacks of ledgers, their pages yellowed. Cobwebs clung to the corners, and the air was stale, like no one had been here in years. Miss Marple stepped inside, her cane steadying her. She opened a ledger, its handwriting faded but clear. It was a record of loans dated 10 years back. One entry caught her eye. Sir Reginald borrowed £10,000, secured against the Star of Aurora. The note was signed by Lady Haverford's late husband. Miss Marple's lips pursed. Sir Reginald's debts were no secret, but this tied him to the diamond directly. Had he stolen it to clear his slate? She tucked the ledger under her arm, closing the panel behind her. The library was quiet, but her mind buzzed. The hidden room was a gold mine, but it raised questions. Who else knew about it? And why was the diamond used as collateral? She needed to talk to Sir Reginald, but first she wanted to watch the others. People acted guilty when they felt cornered, and she was good at cornering. Miss Marple found Sir Reginald in the billiard room, a smoky space with green felt tables and cues lined up like soldiers. He was alone, knocking balls around, his face redder than usual. A glass of whiskey sat on the table, half empty. He looked up as she entered, his laugh forced. "Miss Marple, come to play a game." She smiled, her eyes sharp. "Not today, Sir Reginald. I've been in the library, looking at old records." She held up the ledger, watching his face. "I found something about a loan you took, tied to the diamond." His cue clattered to the table. A loan, that's ancient history. He wiped his brow, his voice loud. "Paid it off years ago." "Nothing to do with this mess, Miss Marple's." Needles clicked from her bag where she'd set it down. "Course. But it's curious, isn't it? The diamond was important to you once." She stepped closer, her voice soft. "Where were you really during the blackout?" "The balcony's far from the garden, where I found your cigarette." Sir Reginald's eyes widened, then narrowed. "I told you I was getting air." "Those cigarettes, anyone could have dropped one." He grabbed his glass, draining it. "I'm no thief, Miss Marple. Leave me be." She nodded, her face kind but her mind racing. His anger was real, but so was his fear. She left him, the ledger still under her arm. Sir Reginald was hiding something. But was it the diamond? She needed more. Next, she sought Mrs. Drake, whose flair for drama made her a puzzle. The writer was in the conservatory, a glass-walled room filled with potted plants and wicker chairs. She was scribbling in her notebook, her gray curls bouncing. "Miss Marple," she called, her voice bright. "This theft is pure gold for my next book. A locked case, a blackout genius." Miss Marple sat, her cane resting against her chair. "I found a hidden room in the library," she said, watching Mrs. Drake's pen pause. "Old ledgers, secrets. You write mysteries, don't you? Ever come across a room like that?" Mrs. Drake laughed, but it was too loud. "A hidden room. That's straight out of my novel, The Sapphire Plot." "No, I've never seen one here. Sounds thrilling, though." Her eyes sparkled, but her fingers tightened on her pen. Miss Marple's needles clicked. "You were writing during the blackout. You said, did you hear anything? A door opening, maybe?" She leaned forward, her voice gentle. "Or did you slip out to the garden, where I found your pin?" Mrs. Drake's smile faltered. "My pin? Oh, I told you, I lose those everywhere. I was in the ballroom soaking up the chaos. Perfect for my story." She flipped her notebook shut, her hands shaky. "I'm no thief, Miss Marple. I just watch." Miss Marple nodded, standing. "Watching is a fine thing, Mrs. Drake, but sometimes watchers act." She left, her mind threading the clues. Mrs. Drake's excitement felt staged, like a play. Her pin in the garden, her knowledge of electricities, small things. But they added up. Miss Marple decided to check the diamond case again. She found Jenkins in the ballroom, polishing the glass case where the Star of Aurora had sat. The room was empty, its chandeliers dull in the daylight. Jenkins looked up, his face blank. "Ma'am," he said, his cloth moving in slow circles, "the police will want to see this." Miss Marple stood by the case, her eyes on the lock. "No scratches, no damage," she said, her voice soft. "Whoever opened it was skilled. You said you saw a shadow near the case before the blackout. Can you tell me more?" Jenkins' cloth paused. "It was quick, ma'am. A figure moving fast. Couldn't see who. Too dark." His voice was flat, but his eyes flicked to the door. "Miss." Marple nodded. "You know the manor well, Jenkins? Ever hear of a hidden room in the library?" His face didn't change, but his shoulders stiffened. "No, ma'am. This house is old, though. It's full of surprises." He went back to polishing, his hands steady. Miss Marple's needles clicked in her bag. Jenkins was too calm, too careful. He'd seen something, maybe more than a shadow. She thanked him and left, her mind buzzing. The hidden room, the ledger, the shadow, each clue was a stitch in her pattern. But the pattern wasn't clear yet. She returned to the library, wanting to check the hidden room again. The panel was still there, undisturbed. She stepped inside, her cane tapping the dusty floor. The ledgers were as she'd left them, but she noticed something new, a small key, half hidden under a stack of papers. It was brass, worn but sturdy, the kind that might fit a safe. Miss Marple slipped it into her pocket, her heart quickening. The diamond case didn't use a key, but the manor had other locks. Maybe this was a piece of the puzzle. As she closed the panel, she heard footsteps. She stepped back into the library, her face calm. Clara stood in the doorway, her face pale. "Miss Marple," she said, her voice shaky. I need to tell you something." Ms. Marple sat her knitting bag on her lap. "Go on, Clara. I'm listening." Clara twisted her hands. "Last night I did go to the garden, just for a moment before the blackout. I tore my dress on a bush. But I didn't take the diamond, I swear." Her eyes were wet, her voice breaking. "I just wanted air. I was upset." Miss Marple's needles clicked. "Upset about what, dear?" Clara looked down. "Aunt Margaret. She's so rich. And I have nothing. But I wouldn't steal from her." She met Miss Marple's eyes, her face pleading. "You believe me, don't you?" Miss Marple smiled, her eyes soft but piercing. I believe you're telling part of the truth, Clara. Keep thinking. Small things matter. She stood, her cane tapping. Clara's confession fit the silk clue, but it didn't clear her. Upset or not, she'd lied before. Miss Marple left the library, the key in her pocket and the ledger in her bag. The hidden room had given her more than she'd hoped, a link to Sir Reginald. A hint of Mrs. Drake's theatrics, a shadow from Jenkins, and now Clara's half-truth. The diamond was still gone, but the manor was talking, whispering its secrets. She just had to listen. Chapter 5. A twist of motive. The afternoon sun spilled through the tall windows of Haverford Manor, painting golden patches on the polished floors. The air was heavy with the weight of the missing star of Aurora, the diamond stolen during the gala's blackout. Miss Jane Marple, her black dress crisp and her white hair neat under a simple hat, moved through the house like a quiet shadow. Her cane tapped softly, but her sharp eyes missed nothing. The clues were piling up: a scrap of silk, a cigarette butt, a star-shaped pin, a hidden room, and a brass key, but the puzzle wasn't solved. People's motives, she knew, were the threads that tied clues together, and motives were what she hunted. Now Miss Marple's morning had been busy. The hidden room in the library had revealed a ledger linking Sir Reginald to the diamond through an old loan. Clara's confession about tearing her dress in the garden matched the silk clue. But her story felt half told. Mrs. Drake's pin and Jenkins' shadow near the diamond case raised questions. And Mr. Vaughan's smooth charm hid something sharp. Miss Marple's mind worked like her knitting, stitching clues into a pattern. To find the thief, she needed to tug at their reasons, greed, envy, or something darker. She decided to start with Clara, whose nervous hands and quick glances screamed guilt, even if her words didn't. Miss Marple found her in the Manor's rose garden, sitting on a stone bench, her dark hair loose and her face pale. The roses were in full bloom, their scent sweet, but Clara looked like she hadn't slept. Miss Marple approached, her cane tapping the gravel path. "Clara, may I join you?" she asked, her voice kind but firm. Clara nodded, her fingers twisting. "A handkerchief, of course, Miss Marple." Her voice was small, like she was afraid of her own words. Miss Marple sat her knitting bag on her lap. Her needles clicked softly, a sound that seemed to make Clara tense. "You told me you went to the garden last night, upset about your aunt," Miss Marple said, her eyes on her stitches. "I believe you, but I think there's more. Why were you so upset?" Clara's hands froze. It's hard to explain. Aunt Margaret has everything: money, this house, the diamond. I'm her niece, but I'm nobody. I work in a shop, barely getting by." Her voice cracked and she looked away. "I don't want her life, but I want something of my own." Miss Marple nodded, her face gentle. "Envy is a heavy thing, Clara. Did it make you want the diamond?" Clara's eyes widened. "No, I'd never steal from her. I was angry, yes, but I didn't touch the case." Her hands shook and she clutched the handkerchief tighter. "You have to believe me." Miss Marple's needles clicked. "I want to, dear, but you were near Mr. Vaughan last night, whispering. He knows jewels, doesn't he? Did you talk about the diamond?" Clara's face flushed. We talked. Yes, he said it was beautiful, worth a fortune. But it was just talk." Her voice rose, then fell. "I didn't do anything wrong." Miss Marple smiled, her eyes piercing. "Small things matter, Clara. If you remember anything else, tell me." She stood, her cane tapping as she left. Clara's envy was real, but was it enough to make her a thief? And her connection to Mr. Vaughan was a new thread. One Miss Marple needed to pull next. She sought the village postmaster, Mr. Gibbs, who knew everyone's business. He ran the tiny post office in St. Mary Mead, a cluttered shop with stamps and gossip in equal supply. Miss Marple walked down the Manor's drive, her steps steady despite the uneven path. The village was quiet, its cottages neat, and its streets buzzing with whispers about the theft. She reached the post office, a bell jingling as she entered. Mr. Gibbs, a round man with glasses perched on his nose, looked up from sorting letters. Miss Marple, heard about the diamond? Terrible business. His eyes gleamed, eager for news. Miss Marple smiled, leaning on her cane. Terrible, indeed. I'm helping Lady Haverford. Tell me, Mr. Gibbs, has Clara received any packages lately? From London, perhaps? Mr. Gibbs rubbed his chin, thinking, Clara, you say? Why, yes, just last week. A small parcel from a jeweler in London. Didn't think much of it. She's a young lady, likes pretty things. He chuckled, then stopped, seeing her face. That important? Yes. Miss Marple nodded. It might be. Thank you, Mr. Gibbs. She left, her mind racing. A package from a jeweler could mean anything: a gift, a tool, or a bribe. Clara's story was unraveling, and Mr. Vaughan's role in it was growing clearer. Back at the manor, Miss Marple found Mr. Vaughan in the drawing room, sipping tea and reading a newspaper. His suit was perfect, his smile easy, but his eyes were watchful. Miss Marple, he said, standing. Any luck finding that diamond? She sat, her knitting bag on the table. Not yet, Mr. Vaughan, but I'm learning things. You know jewels? Don't you? Ever work with diamond cases, the kind with tricky locks? His smile didn't waver. I'm a jeweler, ma'am. I know my way around locks, but I'm no safecracker. He chuckled, setting down his cup. That case was high quality. Whoever opened it knew what they were doing. Miss Marple's needles clicked. Indeed. You were close to the case last night. Did you notice anything odd before the blackout? He shrugged, his eyes steady. Just the usual people gawking, guards standing by. When the lights went out, I stayed put. Didn't? Want to bump into anything? His voice was smooth, like polished glass. Miss Marple leaned forward. You spoke with Clara, didn't you? She admires you, I think. Did you talk about the diamond? Mr. Vaughan's smile tightened. Clara. Nice girl, curious about my work. We chatted about gems, nothing more. He stood, brushing his jacket. I hope you find the thief, Miss Marple. Excuse me? He left his steps quick. Miss Marple's needles clicked faster. Mr. Vaughan's calm was a mask, and his connection to Clara was no coincidence. The package from London, their whispers at the gala, all pointed to a plan. But was it theft or something else? That evening, Lady Haverford asked Miss Marple to join her in the study, a cozy room with bookshelves and a desk piled with papers. Lady Haverford looked tired, her eyes red. Jane, any progress? She asked, her voice thin. Miss Marple sat, her cane resting against her chair. I'm getting closer, Margaret. I'd like to try something. 'Kay? Have a replica diamond made? Mr. Vaughan offered to appraise one, didn't he? Lady Haverford nodded. Yes, he did. I have a glass. Copy in the safe. Why? Miss Marple smiled. Let's show it to him. I want to see his reaction. She didn't say more, but her mind was spinning. A replica might flush out the truth, especially if Mr. Vaughan knew the real diamond's field. Then next morning, Mr. Vaughan arrived in the study where Lady Haverford had set the glass replica in a velvet box. Miss Marple stood by, her knitting bag on her arm. Mr. Vaughan picked up the replica, his fingers careful. He turned it under the light, his eyes narrowing. For a moment his face changed just a flicker, but Miss Marple caught it. Recognition or disappointment. He knew this wasn't the Star of Aurora. It's a fine piece, he said, his voice smooth again. But it's not your diamond, Lady Haverford. Just a copy. He set it down, his smile back in place. Lady Haverford sighed. I know. I just hoped. Thank you, Mr. Vaughan. He left, and Miss Marple turned to Lady Haverford. He knew it was fake too quickly, she said, her voice low. He's seen the real one up close, I think. Lady Haverford's eyes widened. You think he's the thief? Miss Marple shook her head. Not yet. But he's part of this, and so is Clara. She didn't mention the package or the whispers, but her mind was weaving them together. Clara's envy, Mr. Vaughan's skill, the blackouts timing it, was a tangle. But she was close to a knot. Miss Marple returned to her room, a small guest space with a narrow bed and a window overlooking the garden. She sat, her knitting in. Her lap, the brass key from the hidden room in her pocket. The key didn't fit the diamond case, but it might unlock something else's safe. A box, a secret. She thought of Jenkins, his shadow near the case, and Mrs. Drake, her pin in the garden. Everyone had a motive, but whose was strong enough to steal? The day ended with no diamond, but Miss Marple wasn't discouraged. Motives were clearer, now Clara's. Envy, Mr. Vaughan's cunning, Sir Reginald's debts, Mrs. Drake's drama, Jenkins' silence. The Star of Aurora was out there, and she'd find it, one stitch at a time. Chapter 6. The blackout unraveled. The Haverford Manor stood quiet under a gray afternoon sky, its stone walls holding secrets like an old diary. The Star of Aurora, the diamond stolen during the gala's blackout, was still missing, and the air buzzed with suspicion. Miss Jane Marple, her black dress, neat, and her white hair tucked under a plain hat, moved through the house with steady purpose. Her cane tapped softly, but her sharp eyes caught every detail. The clues: a scrap of silk, a cigarette butt, a cough, star-shaped pin, a hidden room, a brass key. And Mr. Vaughan's flicker of recognition were threads in her knitting, and she was close to a pattern. The blackout, she knew, was the heart of the theft. And unraveling it would lead to the thief. Miss Marple's morning had been full of motives. Clara's envy, tied to a mysterious package from a London jeweler, pointed to a plan with Mr. Vaughan, whose smooth charm hit a sharp edge. Sir Reginald's old loan, secured by the diamond, gave him reason to steal. Mrs. Drake's theatrical flair and electrical know-how made her a puzzle. And Jenkins' calm silence felt like a mask. The blackout 90 seconds of darkness had given someone the chance to open the diamond case and vanish with the Star of Aurora. Miss Marple needed to know how it happened and who made it happen. She started with Jenkins, the butler whose steady hands and quiet steps made him hard to read. She found him in the Manor's kitchen, a warm room smelling of bread and polish. He was checking a list, his gray hair neat and his face blank. "Good afternoon, Jenkins," Miss Marple said, leaning on her cane. "I'd like to talk about the blackout again. Can you show me the fuse box?" Jenkins nodded, his eyes steady. "Of course, ma'am. It's in the basement." He led her down a narrow staircase, the air growing cool and damp. The basement was a maze of stone walls and crates lit by a single bulb. The fuse box, a rusty metal panel, was bolted to the wall. Jenkins opened it, revealing a tangle of wires and switches. Miss Marple peered inside, her knitting bag slung over her arm. "You said the wiring's old. Did you check it after the blackout?" Jenkins pointed to a switch. "Yes, ma'am. It's one tripped. Happens sometimes with the chandeliers, they draw a lot of power. I reset it and the lights came back." His voice was flat, like he was reading a recipe. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed. 90 seconds, Jenkins. That's how long the lights were out. Enough time for someone to move to the diamond case, open it, and slip away. "Did you see anyone near the fuse box before the gala?" Jenkins' hand paused on the panel. "No, ma'am. I was busy serving drinks." "Okay." But Mrs. Drake was in the hall earlier, fixing a lamp. Said it flickered. His tone didn't change, but his eyes flicked too. Hers. Miss Marple nodded, her needles clicking softly in her bag. "Thank you, Jenkins. You've been very helpful." She climbed the stairs, her mind racing. Mrs. Drake's electrical skills were no secret, and Jenkins' mention of her felt deliberate, like he was pointing a finger. Was he deflecting or telling the truth? She decided to confront Mrs. Drake. Next, the writer was in the conservatory, surrounded by potted ferns and glass walls. Her gray curls bounced as she scribbled in her notebook, her bright scarf tied loosely. "Miss Marple," she called, her voice loud. "This theft is a masterpiece. I'm calling my next book, The Diamond Vanish." Miss Marple sat, her cane resting against her chair. "Been to the fuse box, Mrs. Drake. Jenkins says you were fixing a lamp before the gala. You know electricity, don't you?" Mrs. Drake laughed, her pen pausing. "A bit. I'm no expert, but I can handle a fuse or two. That lamp was a nuisance, kept flickering. I tightened a wire and it was fine." Her eyes sparkled like she was enjoying the question. Miss Marple's needles clicked. "The blackout lasted 90 seconds. It's just enough time for the theft. Could someone have tripped the fuse on purpose?" Mrs. Drake leaned forward, her voice eager. "Oh, that's clever. Like in my book, The Sapphire Plot. The villain cuts the power to steal a jewel. But me, I was writing in the ballroom, not touching fuses." She waved her notebook, her smile wide. Miss Marple's eyes sharpened. "Your book sounds familiar, Mrs. Drake. A blackout, a stolen gem. It's very close to what happened. And I found your pin in the garden. Were you really in the ballroom all night?" Mrs. Drake's smile faltered. "My pin. I told you. I lose those everywhere. And yes, I was writing. Ask anyone." Her voice rose and her hands gripped the notebook. "I'm no thief, Miss Marple. I just love a good story." Miss Marple stood, her cane tapping. "Stories are powerful, Mrs. Drake. But truth is stronger." She left, her mind weaving the clues. Mrs. Drake's book was too close to the crime, and her electrical knowledge made her a suspect. The pin in the garden suggested she'd lied about her movements. But was she clever enough to plan a blackout? Miss Marple needed to map the blackout's timeline. She returned to the ballroom where the diamond case still stood, empty and mocking. The chandeliers hung overhead, their crystals dull in the daylight. She stood by the case, picturing the gala music, laughter, the crowd around the diamond. The lights went out at midnight, plunging the room into darkness. 90 seconds later, they returned, and the diamond was gone. She called Jenkins over, who arrived with his usual calm. "Jenkins, let's walk through the blackout," she said. "Where were you when the lights went out?" He stood straight, his hands clasped. "Near the back of the room, ma'am, holding a tray of drinks." "I stayed still to avoid spilling." His voice was steady, but his eyes watched her closely. Miss Marple nodded. "And the shadow you saw near the case, when was that?" "Just before the blackout," he said. "A figure moving fast. Couldn't tell who." Then the lights went out. His face didn't change, but his fingers twitched. Miss Marple paced, her cane tapping. 90 seconds. The thief needed to reach the case, open it, take the diamond, and move away. The lock wasn't forced, so they knew the combination or had a tool. Where were the guards? Jenkins pointed to the case. "One on each side, ma'am." But in the dark they were confused. One said he heard footsteps, but he couldn't see. His voice was calm, but Miss Marple caught a flicker in his eyes, like he was holding something back. She thanked him and sat in a chair, her knitting bag on her lap. Her needles clicked as she thought. The blackout was planned, she was sure. Mrs. Drake's skills, Clara's package, Mr. Vaughan's jewel knowledge. Sir Reginald's debts, Jenkins' shadow, they all fit, but not neatly. The thief needed access, skill, and nerve. But what if? It wasn't one person. What if two or more worked together? Miss Marple decided to test Mrs. Drake's story. She found Clara in the morning room, sipping tea and looking nervous. "Clara," Miss Marple said, sitting across from her, "you were in the ballroom during the blackout? Did you see Mrs. Drake writing, like she said?" Clara frowned, her hands twisting her cup. "Mrs. Drake? I don't know. It was so dark. I saw her earlier with her notebook, but I can't say for sure." Her voice was shaky and her eyes darted away. Miss Marple's needles clicked. "Thank you, Clara. You're doing well to remember." She stood, her mind buzzing. Clara's uncertainty didn't clear Mrs. Drake, but it didn't damn her either. The blackout was a perfect cover, and someone had used it like a cloak. Miss Marple returned to the fuse box alone, wanting to check it herself. The basement was dim, the bulb casting long shadows. She opened the panel, her eyes scanning the wires. She wasn't an electrician, but she knew enough to spot tampering. The tripped switch looked normal, but a small scratch on the panel caught her eye, like a tool had slipped. It was fresh, the metal shiny. Someone had been here, and not just to reset a fuse. She climbed back upstairs, her cane tapping. The scratch was a new clue, small but sharp. Mrs. Drake's lamp-fixing story was shaky, and Jenkins' calm felt too perfect. Mr. Vaughan and Clara's whispers hinted at a plan, and Sir Reginald's lies about the garden added weight. Miss Marple's mind spun, but one thought stood out. The blackout wasn't an accident. It was a door opened for the thief. She sat in the library, the hidden room's panel behind her, and pulled out her knitting. Her needles clicked as she thought. The blackout, the case, the shadow, they were pieces of a dance, and she was learning the steps. The Star of Aurora was out there, hidden by lies. But lies, she knew, always left traces, and she'd find them one stitch at a time. Chapter 7. The trap is set. The Haverford Manor buzzed with a restless energy, its grand halls shadowed by the mystery of the stolen Star of Aurora. The diamond, snatched during the gala's 90-second blackout, remained missing, and the suspects, Sir Reginald, Clara, Mr. Vaughan, Mrs. Drake, and Jenkins, were like threads in Miss Jane Marple's knitting, tangled but slowly forming a pattern. Miss Marple, her black dress neat and her white hair tucked under a plain hat, moved through the house with quiet purpose. Her cane tapped the floor, but her sharp eyes caught every glance, every twitch. The clue's a scrap of silk, a cigarette, but a star-shaped pin, a hidden room, a brass key. A scratched fuse box pointed to lies. And now she needed to shake the truth loose. Miss Marple's morning had been a weave of motives and moments. Clara's envy and her whispered talks with Mr. Vaughan hinted at a plan backed by a package from a London jeweler. Sir Reginald's old loan tied him to the diamond, and his lies about the garden raised red flags. Mrs. Drake's electrical skills and her too-perfect mystery novel made her a puzzle, while Jenkins' calm and his shadow near the diamond case hid something deeper. The blackout was no accident, Miss Marple was sure, and the scratch on the fuse box proved someone had tampered with it. To catch the thief, she needed to set a trap, one that would make the guilty squirm. She found Lady Haverford in the study, a warm room with bookshelves and a desk cluttered with papers. Lady Haverford looked worn, her eyes red and her hands twisting a handkerchief. "Jane, any news?" she asked, her voice thin with hope. Miss Marple sat her knitting bag on her lap. "We're close, Margaret. I have an idea. What if we announce a second diamond has been found? A decoy, of course. We'll say it was hidden in the manor and watch how everyone reacts. A thief might panic or try to steal it." Lady Haverford's eyes widened. "A decoy. I have that glass replica Mr. Vaughan looked at. We could use it. But is it safe?" Miss Marple's needles clicked softly. "It's a risk, but a small one. The thief is still here, I think, and they're nervous. This will push them to act." Her voice was calm, but her mind was sharp, picturing the suspects' faces. Lady Haverford nodded. "I trust you, Jane. Let's do it." "When? Tonight?" Miss Marple said. "At dinner. Spread the word, but keep it vague. Say the diamond was found in a guest room. Nothing more." She stood, her cane tapping. "I'll need Jenkins to help me watch." Lady Haverford agreed, and Miss Marple left to prepare. Her plan was simple but clever. The fake diamond would be a mirror, reflecting the thief's guilt. She needed to watch the suspects closely, especially their eyes. Eyes, she knew, told truths that mouths hid. That evening, the dining room was aglow of candlelight and tension. The long table was set with silver and crystal, but the mood was heavy. The suspects sat stiffly. Sir Reginald, red-faced and sipping wine. Clara, her hands fidgeting. Mr. Vaughan, his smile tight. Mrs. Drake, her notebook open. And Jenkins, serving with his usual calm. Lady Haverford at the head looked nervous, but determined. Miss Marple sat quietly, her knitting bag by her chair. Her needles clicked as she watched, her eyes moving from face to face. Lady Haverford cleared her throat, her voice carrying. My friends, I have news. This afternoon, we found a diamond in one of the guest rooms. It's locked in the safe now, under guard. We believe it's the Star of Aurora. The room froze. Sir Reginald choked on his wine, his eyes wide. Clara's fork clattered to her plate, her face pale. Mr. Vaughan's smile flickered, his fingers tightening on his glass. Mrs. Drake's pen stopped, her mouth open. Jenkins, pouring water, didn't flinch, but his eyes darted to Miss Marple. She noted every reaction, her mind stitching them together. That's wonderful, sir, Reginald said, his voice too loud. Where was it? Lady Haverford shook her head. We're not saying yet. The police will handle it tomorrow. Her voice trembled, but she held firm. Clara spoke, her voice shaky. A guest room? Whose? Her eyes flicked to Mr. Vaughan, then away. Mr. Vaughan leaned back, his smile smooth. Again, remarkable. A lucky find. May I see it, to confirm it's real? His tone was light, but his eyes were hard. Mrs. Drake laughed, a sharp sound. This is straight out of a novel. A hidden diamond found by chance. I must write this down. She scribbled furiously, her hands unsteady. Jenkins moved silently, refilling glasses. Miss Marple watched him, her needles clicking. Calm was a wall, but walls had cracks. The dinner went on, but the air was thick with nerves. Sir Reginald drank heavily. Clara barely ate. Mr. Vaughan's charm felt forced, and Mrs. Drake's excitement was too bright. Miss Marple ate slowly, her eyes never still. After dinner, she met Jenkins in the hall, away from the others. Jenkins, she said, her voice low, I need you to watch the safe tonight. It's in the study, yes. He nodded, his face blank. Yes, ma'am. The decoy's inside, under lock. Keep an eye out. His voice was steady, but his fingers twitched. Ms. Marple's eyes sharpened. Good. If anyone comes near, don't stop them. Just watch and tell me. She patted his arm, her smile kind but piercing. Jenkins bowed and left, his steps silent. Miss Marple found Lady Haverford in the drawing room, pacing. Jane, do. You think this will work? She asked, her hands twisting. Miss Marple sat, her knitting in her lap. It's working already, Margaret. Did you see their faces? Someone's scared, and scared people make mistakes. Her needles clicked, and she smiled. Now we wait. That night, Miss Marple and Jenkins hid in the study behind a heavy curtain near the safe. The room was dark, lit only by a sliver of moonlight. The safe. A sturdy metal box sat in a corner, its lock gleaming. Miss Marple's knitting bag was at her feet, her cane in hand. Jenkins stood like a statue, his breathing slow. They waited. The silence thick. At midnight, a floorboard creaked. Miss Marple's heart quickened, but her face stayed calm. A shadow moved in the doorway. Clara, her nightgown pale in the moonlight. She held a jeweler's loupe, a small lens used to inspect gems. She crept to the safe, her hands shaking as she knelt. Marple watched, her eyes narrow. Clara fumbled with the lock, her breath fast. Before Miss Marple could act, another shadow appeared. Mrs. Drake, holding a screwdriver. Her scarf was gone, her curls wild. She hissed at Clara, her voice low. What are you doing? This is my chance, Clara gasped, dropping the loupe. Your chance? I just wanted to see it. Her whisper was sharp, panicked. Mrs. Drake stepped closer, the screwdriver glinting. Don't lie, you're after it, same as me. Her voice was hard, her eyes wild. Miss Marple stepped from the curtain, her cane tapping. "Good evening, ladies," she said, her voice calm. Jenkins moved behind her, his face unreadable. Clara yelped, and Mrs. Drake froze. The screwdriver. Falling to the floor, Miss Marple, Clara stammered. I wasn't stealing. I just wanted to look." Mrs. Drake laughed, a nervous sound. "Nor was I. I was researching for my book." Her hands shook, her eyes darting to the safe. Miss Marple's needles clicked in her bag. "Research, Mrs. Drake. With a screwdriver? And you, Clara, with a loop. Let's talk in the morning." Strap caught more than I expected. Her voice was kind, but her eyes were steel. Jenkins escorted the women to their rooms. Miss Marple sat in the study, her mind racing. Clara and Mrs. Drake both at the safe, both lying. But neither had the diamond the safe was still locked. The decoy. Inside, someone else had the real Star of Aurora, and the trap had shown her something new. The theft wasn't one person's work. It was a web, and she was close to its center. Miss Marple returned to her room, the brass key from the hidden room in her pocket. The night was quiet, but her thoughts were loud. Clara's loop, Mrs. Drake's screwdriver, Jenkins' watchful eyes, they were pieces of a bigger picture. The diamond was out there, hidden by a clever hand. But clever hands, she knew left fingerprints, and she'd find them, one stitch at a time. Chapter 8. The confession. The morning light crept through the tall windows of Haverford Manor, casting soft glows on the polished floors. The air was thick with the weight of the stolen Star of Aurora, the diamond that had vanished during the gala's blackout. Miss Jane Marple, her black dress, neat, and her white hair tucked under a plain hat, sat in the drawing room, her cane resting against her chair. Her sharp eyes missed nothing, and her mind worked like her knitting needles, stitching clues into a pattern. The trap she'd set last night, announcing a fake diamond in the safe, had caught Clara and Mrs. Drake sneaking around. But neither had the real diamond. The puzzle was close to solved, and Miss Marple was ready to pull the final threads. The clues were a tangle: a scrap of blue silk from Clara's dress, a cigarette butt tied to Sir Reginald, a star-shaped pin from Mrs. Drake, a hidden room with a ledger linking Sir Reginald to the diamond, a brass key, a scratched fuse box, and Mr. Vaughan's knowing glance at the replica. Clara's envy and her whispers with Mr. Vaughan hinted at a plan backed by a jeweler's package from London. Sir Reginald's debts made him desperate. Mrs. Drake's electrical skills and novel mirrored the theft. And Jenkins' shadow near the diamond case hid a secret. Last night's trap showed Clara and Mrs. Drake had their own schemes, but the real thief was still out there. Miss Marple needed to corner them all. She asked Lady Haverford to gather the suspects in the drawing room. The room was grand, with heavy curtains and a fire crackling in the hearth, but the mood was heavy. Sir Reginald slumped in a chair, his face red and his eyes bloodshot. Clara sat stiffly, her hands twisting a handkerchief, her face pale. Mr. Vaughan leaned against the wall, his smile tight, but his eyes sharp. Mrs. Drake scribbled in her notebook, her gray curls wild, her excitement forced. Jenkins stood by the door, his face blank, serving tea with steady hands. Lady Haverford, pale and tired, sat near Miss Marple, her trust in the old lady cleared. Miss Marple stood, her voice soft but firm. "Thank you for coming. The Star of Aurora is still missing, but last night showed me something. This theft wasn't one person's work, it was a web, and you're all caught in it." Oh. Her eyes moved from face to face, her knitting bag on the table. "Let's start with you, Clara." Clara gasped, her handkerchief dropping. "Me, I didn't take it. I told you I just wanted to see the fake diamond last night." Her voice shook, her eyes wet. Miss Marple's needles clicked. "You were in the garden, Clara, where I found your silk. You lied about staying in the ballroom. You got a package from a London jeweler, and you whispered with Mr. Vaughan. Tell me the truth." Clara's face crumpled. All right, she sobbed. I wanted to swap the diamond for a fake. I was tired of being poor, of Aunt Margaret's wealth. Mr. Vaughn said he could get a replica. I'd sell the real one to start a new life. She looked at Mr. Vaughn, her voice breaking. But I didn't do it. The blackout happened, and someone else took it. Mr. Vaughn's smile vanished. Clara, that's nonsense, he said, his voice sharp. We talked about jewels, sure, but I never planned a theft. His eyes darted to Miss Marple. His hands clenched. Miss Marple nodded, her eyes piercing. Mr. Vaughn, you knew the replica wasn't the real diamond too quickly. You've seen the Star of Aurora up close, haven't you? And your skills with locks make you a fine candidate for opening that case. Mr. Vaughn's jaw tightened. I'm a jeweler, not a thief. I didn't touch the case. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed him, flickering with fear. Miss Marple turned to Mrs. Drake, whose pen had stopped. Mrs. Drake, you were at the safe last night with a screwdriver. Your novel, The Sapphire Plot, describes a theft. Just like this blackout and all. And, electricity. Did you plan the blackout? Mrs. Drake laughed, a nervous sound. Me. I was researching. I wanted to stage a fake theft for my book's publicity. The screwdriver was for show too. Feel the part. Her hands shook, her notebook slipping. I didn't take the diamond, I just got carried away. Ugh. Sir Reginald snorted, his voice slurred. This is ridiculous. You're all pointing fingers, but I was on the balcony, nowhere near the case. His hands shook, spilling his tea. Miss Marple's needles clicked faster. Sir Reginald, your cigarette butt was in the garden, not the balcony. And the ledger I found shows you owed money, tied to the diamond. You had reason to steal it. Sir Reginald's face went purple. That loan was years ago. I'm no thief. He stood, swaying, then sat, his eyes avoiding hers. Miss Marple turned to Jenkins, who stood like a statue. Jenkins, you saw a shadow near the case before the blackout. You know this house better than anyone? And you're too calm, like you're hiding something. Jenkins' face didn't change, but his fingers tightened on the teapot. A butler, ma'am. I see things, but I don't act. I told you what I saw. His voice was flat, but his eyes held a spark. Miss Marple stood, her cane tapping. Here's what I think. Clara and Mr. Vaughn planned to swap the diamond, but the blackout ruined it. Mrs. Drake wanted a staged theft for her book. And she tampered with the fuse box, hence the scratch I found. But neither of you has the diamond. Someone else used. Your plans took advantage of the darkness. Her eyes locked on Jenkins, someone who knew the case, the house, and the timing. The room went silent. Clara sobbed. Mr. Vaughn's smile was gone. Mrs. Drake's pen fell, and Sir Reginald stared at his hands. Jenkins' face was still, but his eyes flickered like a crack in stone. Miss Marple stepped closer to Jenkins. You were a locksmith before you came here, weren't you? I heard it from the village years ago. You could open that case in seconds, and you knew Clara and Mrs. Drake's plans. You're always listening. You saw your chance and took it. Jenkins' hands shook, the teapot clattering. Ma'am, His voice broke and he looked down. You're right. I took it. The words were quiet, but they hit like a hammer. Lady Haverford gasped, her hand to her mouth. Jenkins, how could you? Jenkins' shoulders slumped. Overheard Clara and Mr. Vaughn in the hall planning their swap. Then Mrs. Drake talking about her fake theft. I knew the blackout was coming. She'd been at the fuse box that day. When the lights went out, I moved. Opened the case, took the diamond. It was easy. His voice was dull, like he was tired of hiding. I hid it in the library, in a hollowed-out book. I was going to sell it, start over somewhere new. Miss Marple nodded, her face calm, but her eyes sharp. Where's the book, Jenkins? He sighed, his face gray. Library, third shelf, history of roses. It's there." His voice was barely a whisper. Lady Haverford stood, her voice shaking. "Jenkins, you've betrayed me after all these years." Miss Marple patted her arm. "Margaret, let's find the diamond first. Then the police can handle this." She turned to Jenkins. "Show us." Jenkins led them to the library, his steps heavy. The room was quiet, its shelves towering. He pulled a thick book from the third shelf, its cover worn. He opened it, revealing a hollowed-out center. There, nestled in velvet, was the star of Aurora, sparkling like a tiny star. Lady Haverford gasped, tears in her eyes. "It's really here." Miss Marple's needles clicked in her bag. "Well done, Jenkins. You've saved us time." Her voice was kind, but her eyes were steel. She turned to Lady Haverford. "Call the police. They'll need to speak to everyone." The room filled with Claire's sobs, Sir Reginald's muttering, Mr. Vaughan's protests, Mrs. Drake's nervous laughter. Jenkins stood still, his face empty, like a man who'd lost a game. Miss Marple watched them all, her mind clear. The trap had worked, not just catching Clara and Mrs. Drake, but pushing Jenkins to confess. His skills, his eavesdropping, his calm fade made him the perfect thief. Until she'd unraveled him. Lady Haverford hugged Miss Marple, her voice thick. "Jane, you're a miracle." "How did you know?" Miss Marple smiled, her eyes soft. "People are like my knitting, Margaret. They leave loose threads and I just pull them." She patted Lady Haverford's hand, her cane tapping as she stepped back. The diamond was back, but the Manor's peace was broken. Clara's envy, Mr. Vaughan's cunning, Mrs. Drake's drama, Sir Reginald's lies, Jenkins' betrayal, they'd all played a part. Miss Marple sat her knitting in her lap as the police arrived. Her needles clicked, and her mind was already turning to the next puzzle, though she hoped it would be simpler. The star of Aurora sparkled in its velvet nest, but Miss Marple's eyes were on the people where the real story lay. Chapter 9. The final piece. The Haverford Manor stood calm under a pale morning sky, its stone walls no longer heavy with the weight of the missing star of Aurora. The diamond, stolen during the gala's blackout, was back, nestled in a hollowed-out book in the library, thanks to Miss Jane Marple's clever trap and sharp mind. Miss Marple, her black dress tidy and her white hair neat under a plain hat, sat in the drawing room, her cane by her chair. Her knitting needles clicked softly, but her eyes were sharp, tying up the last threads of the puzzle. Jenkins' confession had solved the theft, but small details still nagged at her, like a stitch that didn't sit right. She needed to be sure every piece fit. The clues had been a tangle, a scrap of blue silk from Clara's dress, a cigarette butt tied to Sir Reginald, a star-shaped pin from Mrs. Drake, a hidden room with a ledger linking Sir Reginald to the diamond, a brass key, a scratched fuse box, and Mr. Vaughan's knowing glance at the replica. Clara's envy and her plan with Mr. Vaughan to swap the diamond had been foiled by the blackout. Mrs. Drake's staged theft for her novel had muddied the waters. And Jenkins, the quiet butler with a locksmith's past, had used their schemes to steal the diamond himself. Last night's trap announcing a fake diamond had pushed Jenkins to confess. But Miss Marple wanted to confirm his story and close the case tight. She started by revisiting the library, where the diamond had been found. The room was quiet, its tall shelves filled with books and secrets. The History of Roses, the hollowed-out book Jenkins had used, sat on a table, its velvet lining empty now. Lady Haverford had locked the Star of Aurora in her safe under police guard. Miss Marple ran her fingers over the book, her mind turning. Jenkins had said he hid the diamond during the blackout, but something felt off. The book's pages were crisp, not dusty like the hidden room's ledgers. Had he prepared the hiding spot before the gala? She pulled the brass key from her pocket, the one she'd found in the hidden room. Didn't fit the diamond case, but it might unlock something else's box, a drawer or a final clue. She checked the library's desk, its drawers locked. Tight. The key slid into one, turning with a soft click. Inside was a notebook, its pages filled with Jenkins' neat handwriting. It listed manor schedules, guest names, and most telling a sketch of the diamond case's lock. Miss Marple's lips pursed. Jenkins hadn't just seized a chance. He'd planned the theft maybe for weeks. Her mind flicked to another detail. The wax residue she'd noticed near the diamond case the morning after the theft. It was faint, like a candle had dripped, but the gala had used electric lights. Jenkins always carried candles for emergencies, she recalled, and he'd been near the case before the blackout. The wax was no accident hit, marked his presence, a tiny mistake in his careful plan. Miss Marple tucked the notebook into her knitting bag, her heart steady. The key and the wax were the final pieces. Proving Jenkins' guilt beyond his confession, she decided to confront Jenkins one last time, to tie up any loose ends. The police had him in the manor's parlor, a small room with faded wallpaper and a single guard. Jenkins sat, his gray hair neat, but his face gray, like a man who'd lost everything. His hands were cuffed, but his eyes met Miss Marple's with a flicker of defiance. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low, "come to gloat." Miss Marple sat, her knitting bag on her lap. "Not at all, Jenkins. I want the whole truth. I found your notebook in the library with sketches of the lock. You planned this, didn't you? Not just a spur-of-the-moment theft?" Jenkins' shoulders slumped. "You're sharp. I'll give you that. Yes, I planned it. Heard Clara and Mr. Vaughan whispering weeks ago, plotting their swap. Then Mrs. Drake, bragging about her fake theft. I knew the blackout was coming. She'd been at the fuse box fiddling. I studied the case, practiced the lock. When the lights went out, I was ready." His voice was dull, but his eyes held a spark of pride. Miss Marple's needles clicked. "The wax by the case that was yours, from your candle. You lit it to see the lock, didn't you?" Jenkins blinked, then nodded. "Clever. Yes, I used a candle. Thought I'd cleaned it up. Should have known you'd spot it." He leaned back, his cuffs clinking. "I'm done, Miss Marple. You got me." Miss Marple stood, her cane tapping. "You got yourself, Jenkins. Greed undoes the best plans." She left her mind clear. The notebook and wax sealed his guilt, and the key had unlocked the truth. Jenkins wasn't just a thief. He was a planner, using others' schemes as his ladder. Next, she checked on Clara, who was in the morning room, her face pale and her hands twisting a scarf. The police had questioned her about her plan with Mr. Vaughan, and she looked like a trapped bird. "Miss Marple," she said, her voice shaky, "I didn't mean for this. I just wanted a way out." Miss Marple sat, her eyes kind but firm. "No, Clara, but you lied and you planned to steal. Why, Mr. Vaughan, did he push you?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. He made it sound easy. Said he'd get a fake diamond and we'd split the money. But when the blackout happened, I panicked. I didn't know Jenkins would take it." Her voice broke, and she buried her face in her hands. Miss Marple patted her shoulder. "Tell the police everything, Clara. Honesty will help you now." She stood, her cane tapping. Clara's confession matched Jenkins, and her fear was real. She wasn't the thief, but she'd been a step away. Miss Marple found Mr. Vaughan in the billiard room, leaning on a cue, his smile gone. The police had grilled him, and his slick charm was fraying. "It's Marple," he said, his voice tight. "I suppose you think I'm the mastermind." She leaned on her cane, her eyes piercing. "You planned with Clara. Mr. Vaughan, you knew the diamond's value, and you could have opened the case. Why didn't you?" He sighed, setting down the cue. "I wanted to." Clara was desperate, easy to sway. "I got the replica from London, but the blackout wasn't my doing. Someone beat us to it, Jenkins, I guess." His eyes were hard, but his hands shook. "I'm no saint, but I didn't steal it." Miss Marple nodded. "The police will decide that." "But you're not innocent, Mr. Vaughan." She left her mind, stitching his words into place. He'd been ready to steal, But Jenkins had outplayed him, using his plan as a distraction. Mrs. Drake was next. In the conservatory, her notebook open, but her pen still. Her gray curls were limp, her scarf loose. "Miss Marple," she said, her voice flat. "I made a mess, didn't I?" Miss Marple sat her knitting bag on her lap. "You did, Mrs. Drake. You tampered with the fuse box, didn't you? For your book's publicity." Mrs. Drake nodded, her eyes wet. "I thought a fake theft would sell copies. I fiddled with the fuse to cause a blackout, but I didn't take the diamond." "Jenkins used my plan, didn't he?" Her voice was bitter, her hands clutching her notebook. Miss Marple's needles clicked. "He did your screwdriver last night. Was it really just for show?" Mrs. Drake laughed, a sad sound. "Yes, I wanted to feel like my characters." "Stupid, I know." She looked down, her face gray. "Sorry." Miss Marple stood, her cane tapping. "Sorry doesn't undo it, but it's a start. Tell the police the truth." She left, her mind clear. Mrs. Drake's blackout had been the spark, but Jenkins had fanned it into a fire. Finally, Miss Marple spoke to Sir Reginald, who was in the dining room nursing a whiskey. His red face was sweaty, his eyes dull. "Miss Marple," he muttered, "you got your man. Leave me out of it." She sat, her eyes sharp. "Your cigarette butt was in the garden, Sir Reginald, and your loan tied you to the diamond. Were you part of this?" He slammed his glass down. "No. I was in debt, yes, but I didn't steal. I was in the garden smoking, avoiding creditors. That's all." His voice was rough, his hands shaking. Miss Marple nodded. "I believe you, but your lies didn't help. Be honest with the police." She stood, her cane tapping. "Sir Reginald was a fool, not a thief." His greed a side note in the bigger story. Lady Haverford found Miss Marple in the study, her face bright with relief. "Jane, you've done it. The diamond's safe, and Jenkins is with the police. How can I thank you?" She held out a velvet pouch, heavy with coins. "Please, take this." Miss Marple smiled, pushing the pouch back. "No, Margaret. Cup of tea and a quiet evening are reward enough." Her voice was warm, but her eyes were already elsewhere. Thinking of her cottage, the police took Jenkins, Clara, Mr. Vaughan, and Mrs. Drake for questioning. While Sir Reginald sulked in his room, the manor felt lighter, its secrets aired. Miss Marple sat by the window, her knitting in her lap, the brass key and notebook in her bag. The wax, the key, the confession they'd closed the case, but the real lesson was human nature. Greed, envy, pride, they'd woven the web, and she'd untangled it as she sipped her tea. Miss Marple's needles clicked, her mind calm. The Star of Aurora sparkled in its safe, but the real treasure was the truth, hard-won and clear as the diamond itself. Chapter 10. Reflections in St. Mary Mead. The sun dipped low over St. Mary Mead, painting the village in soft golds and pinks. Miss Jane Marple sat in her cozy cottage, a small stone house with roses climbing the walls. Her black dress was swapped for a comfortable cardigan, and her white hair was loose, framing her gentle face. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting warm shadows on the walls, and a kettle hummed on the stove. Her knitting needles clicked steadily, working a soft blue scarf, but her sharp eyes were distant, replaying the mystery of the Star of Aurora. The diamond was back in Haverford Manor safe, the thief caught, but Miss Marple's mind lingered on the lessons of human nature, as tangled and telling as her wool. The past few days had been a whirlwind. The gallus blackout, the stolen diamond, and the web of suspects. Sir Reginald, Clara, Mr. Vaughan, Mrs. Drake, and Jenkins had tested her patience and wit. The clues, like stitches in her knitting, had come together. A scrap of blue silk from Clara's dress, a cigarette butt tied to Sir Reginald, a star-shaped pin from Mrs. Drake, a hidden rooms ledger linking Sir Reginald to the diamond, a brass key, a scratched fuse box, wax residue by the diamond case, and Mr. Vaughan's knowing glance at a replica. Clara's envy-driven plan with Mr. Vaughan to swap the diamond had been thwarted by Jenkins. The butler with a locksmith's past who used Mrs. Drake's staged blackout to steal the real gem. Miss Marple's trap a fake diamond announcement had fleshed out Clara and Mrs. Drake's schemes and pushed Jenkins to confess, revealing the diamond's hiding spot in a hollowed-out book. Now, back in her cottage, Miss Marple sipped tea, the cup warm in her hands. The village was abuzz with the scandal, and her neighbors had stopped by all day, eager for details. Mrs. Price, the baker, had brought scones, her eyes wide as she asked, "Was it really Jenkins?" After all these years, young Tommy, the grocer's boy, had lingered by her gate whispering, "Did you see the diamond, Miss Marple? Is it as big as they say?" She'd smiled, given vague answers, and sent them off with kind words. The truth was hers to hold, like a finished scarf, and she didn't need to flaunt it. Her mind wandered to the suspects, each a thread in the mystery's weave. Clara, with her desperate envy, had dreamed of a new life, swayed by Mr. Vaughan's smooth promises. Her tears in the morning room, her confession about the jeweler's package, showed a girl lost in her own wants, not a hardened thief. Miss Marple hoped the police would be kind. Clara needed guidance, not a cell. Mr. Vaughan, with his cunning eyes and jeweler's skill, had planned to profit from Clara's desperation, but Jenkins had outsmarted him. His tight smile in the billiard room, his quick denial, marked him as a man who'd bend the truth to save his skin. The police would dig into his past, Miss Marple was sure, and find more than just this plot. Mrs. Drake, with her wild curls and dramatic flair, had been the spark, tampering with the fuse box for her novel's fame. Her screwdriver in the study. Her nervous laughter showed a woman caught in her own story, not a true criminal. Her novel, The Sapphire Plot, had mirrored the theft too closely. A clue Miss Marple hadn't missed. Mrs. Drake would face consequences. But Miss Marple suspected she'd turn the scandal into her next bestseller. Sir Reginald, with his red face and heavy debts, had been a distraction. His cigarette butt in the garden, a careless lie. His bluster in the dining room, his old loan tied to the diamond, painted him as a man drowning in his own mistakes. Not a mastermind. Jenkins, though, was the heart of it. The quiet butler, with his steady hands and blank face, had fooled them all. His locksmith past, his notebook of plans, his use of Clara and Mrs. Drake's schemes, it was a clever dance, ruined by a drip of wax and Miss Marple's sharp eyes. His confession in the drawing room, his gray face as he showed them the hollowed-out book, marked the end of his mask. Miss Marple felt no triumph, only a quiet sadness. Jenkins had served Lady Haverford for years, his loyalty a lie. Greed, she thought, could twist even the steadiest heart. She set her knitting down, her needles still, and walked to the window. The garden was peaceful, its roses nodding in the breeze. St. Mary Mead was small, its cottages neat, and its people nosy, but it was home. The Manor's drama felt far away now, though the village would talk of it for months. Miss Marple's role would fade into whispers. She preferred it that way. Fame was a loud thing, and she liked her quiet life, her tea, her knitting. Her thoughts turned to Lady Haverford, who'd offered a reward in the study, her face bright with gratitude. Miss Marple had refused the coins, asking only for tea and peace. Lady Haverford's trust had been her true reward, a bond stronger than gold. The Star of Aurora, sparkling in its safe, was a symbol of the Manor's pride, but it was also a magnet for trouble. Miss Marple hoped Lady Haverford would lock it away, far from greedy eyes. She returned to her chair, picking up her knitting. The scarf was nearly done, its blue wool soft and even. Each stitch was like a clue, small but vital, building something whole. The mystery had been like that, tiny pieces from silk to wax that told a story when woven together. Human nature, she mused, was the real puzzle. Clara's envy, Mr. Vaughan's cunning, Mrs. Drake's drama, Sir Reginald's desperation, Jenkins' betrayal, they were all familiar, like patterns she'd seen in the village over years. People wanted, and wanting made them slip. Miss Marple's mind flicked to the brass key, still in her knitting bag. It had unlocked Jenkins' notebook, the final proof of his plan. She'd given it to the police, along with the notebook and her notes on the wax residue. The wax, a careless drip from Jenkins' candle, had been the smallest clue, but the one that sealed his fate. She'd spotted it by the diamond case, a faint smudge others missed. It reminded her of a case years ago when a spilled teacup had pointed to a liar. Small things she thought were the loudest when you listened. The kettle whistled and she poured another cup, the steam curling in the air. The fire popped and her needles clicked, a rhythm that steadied her thoughts. St. Mary Mead would never be quite the same, she knew. The scandal had stirred the village like a stone in a pond. Clara might leave, seeking a fresh start. Mr. Vaughan would slink away, its charm tarnished. Mrs. Drake would write her book, maybe dedicating it to Miss Marple with a wink. Sir Reginald would drown his debts in whiskey unless he learned better. Jenkins would face a cell, his quiet life over. And Lady Haverford would guard her diamond, her trust in others shaken. Miss Marple sipped her tea, her eyes on the fire. The mystery was solved, but her mind was already open, ready for the next puzzle. St. Mary Mead was small, but trouble found it like moths to a flame. A missing cat, a stolen purse, a whispered feud, she'd solve them all, her way, with patience, and a sharp eye. Her neighbors would come, as they always did, with their worries and their scones, and she'd listen, her needles clicking. She thought of her garden where she'd sit tomorrow, tending her roses. The village would buzz, but her cottage would be her haven, its walls holding years of secrets she'd unraveled. The Star of Aurora case was her biggest yet, a tale that would grow in the telling. But to Miss Marple, it was just another scarf. Another pattern, finished and set aside. Her needles clicked faster, the scarf nearly complete. The fire burned low and the village settled into night. Miss Marple smiled, her eyes soft but bright. Human nature was a tangle, but with patience every knot could be undone. The diamond was safe, the truth was out, and St. Mary Mead was hers again until the next mystery called.